She trespassed once and nearly got herself killed. But when she returned, bleeding, armed, and vengeful, what happened next shocked the entire town. This is the true style story of how one quiet man was pushed too far by a neighborhood obsessed with control. You're watching this HOA Lost. Grab your headphones, because this story doesn't just raise questions. It hits like a warning shot. She got shot sneaking onto my farm twice. The first time was a warning shot. The second time, well, let's just say no one expected her to survive it. The police, the paramedics, even the woman herself, when she came to, groaning in the dirt near my east barn, couldn't believe what had just happened. And yet, there she was. Bleeding, furious, and still clutching my property in her trembling hands like it was hers. She'd come back after everything, after the first time, after the restraining order, after the town meeting where she humiliated herself shouting that my land belonged to the HOA. She came back. And this time, she got shot. Again. I didn't mean to do it. But when a woman in a sun hat creeps onto your property at dawn with bolt cutters and a tote bag full of stolen tools, you don't exactly offer her coffee. The worst part? That wasn't even the beginning. No, this had been building for months. Maybe years, if you count the whispers and stares from neighbors when I first moved in. She just happened to be the one crazy enough to act on them. And now she was on the ground, sirens wailing in the distance, my dog barking like mad from the porch, and me? I was shaking. Because in that moment, I knew this wasn't just about property lines or missing tools. This was war. It didn't start that way, of course. I never asked for trouble when I bought that farm. All I wanted was quiet. Back in March, I moved out to the outskirts of a little town in Arizona called Cold Creek Ridge. It was one of those half-rural, half-suburban places where you could see horses and soccer moms on the same road. I'd cashed out of a job in Phoenix, left the noise behind, and poured everything I had into that piece of land. A broken-down 14-acre ranch with a leaning barn, a cracked windmill, and enough weeds to bury a tractor. I loved it the second I saw it. Sure, the place needed work, but it had bones. Old, creaky, honest bones. I rebuilt the porch by hand. Rewired the fence posts myself. Hauled out years' worth of rusted junk left by the last owner. It was my kind of peace, dirty, simple, and earned. The house sat just outside the HOA boundary by about a mile, which I figured would keep things quiet. That assumption didn't last long. About a week after moving in, I met her. Her name was Cheryl Whitcomb. She was one of those tall, wiry women with iron blonde hair and oversized sunglasses who always looked like she was about to scold someone's child. When I first saw her, she was parked halfway across my driveway in a spotless white SUV, engine idling, arms folded as she stared me down. "You can't have livestock here," she said flatly. I'd been unloading feed at the time. I glanced up, confused. "Excuse me?" "This is Cold Creek Ridge," she said. "We don't allow livestock on properties within visual distance of the main road." I blinked at her. "I'm not in Cold Creek Ridge. I'm a mile out. This land isn't under your HOA." She squinted at me like I'd grown a second head. "It's still within view. We have standards." That was my first red flag. I told her to take it up with the county, and she drove off without another word. I didn't think much of it until the following week, when someone cut the power to my barn. Then came the missing tools. Then, the handwritten notes taped to my gate, typed out in neat, bold letters. "Your property is an eyesore. This is not a trash farm. We will pursue fines if you do not comply. Sell now while you can still get a good price." It wasn't hard to guess who was behind them. I'd been warned about people like Cheryl. Every town's got one, the HOA queen, the self-appointed gatekeeper, the person who thinks they own everything they can see. But I didn't know how far she was willing to go. It started small. Petty things. A neighbor's kid admitted to seeing Cheryl sneaking through the tree line that separated my land from the HOA neighborhood. I'd catch glimpses of someone walking near my barn at night, but by the time I got there, no one was around. I installed trail cameras and motion lights. The footage? Blurry figures. Nothing conclusive. Then, my dog, Jack, went missing for 2 days. I don't want to accuse anyone without proof, but when he came back, he was limping and had duct tape wrapped around one paw like someone had tried to restrain him. That's when I knew things were getting dangerous. Still, I didn't fight back. Not yet. I figured if I kept to myself, she'd eventually get bored and move on. I told myself she was just bitter. That she'd had a bad year. That maybe kindness could win her over. So the next time she showed up, this time on foot, pacing my property line and snapping photos, I walked up to her calmly. "Look," I said. "I'm not here to cause trouble. If you've got a problem, talk to me. Don't sneak around. Don't scare my dog. I'm happy to talk things through like adults." She smiled. One of those cold, empty smiles that never reach the eyes. "I am talking to you," she said. "This is me being civil." That was her version of civil. 2 days later, someone slashed the tires on my tractor. That was the last straw. I reported everything to the sheriff's office. They sent a deputy out who walked the property, listened to my story, and nodded like he'd heard it all before. "You got any cameras?" "Yeah," I said. "But nothing clear." "Well, I'd recommend keeping them up. If she sets foot on your land again, you've got the right to protect your property. Just don't escalate." I took his advice. I didn't want a fight. But fights have a way of finding you when you least expect it. Weeks passed. Spring turned to early summer. The grass grew tall, and I focused on planting, fixing up the chicken coop, and trying to forget about Cheryl. For a while, it felt like things had calmed down. Until one morning in June, I found my shed door hanging open, and half my power tools gone. This time, I had footage. Trail cam, east side of the barn. There she was. Sun hat. Sunglasses. Gloves. Tote bag slung over her shoulder. Cheryl. Clear as day. I turned the footage over to the sheriff. They said they'd look into it. But nothing happened. No arrest. No charges. So I did what I could. I reinforced every door on my property. I mounted signs. I added new locks and a backup generator. And I bought a shotgun. I didn't want to use it. God knows I hoped I'd never have to. But I wasn't about to let someone walk all over me again. The next time she came, it was 5:32 a.m. I was half awake, sipping coffee, when my alarm tripped, barnside motion sensor. I grabbed my flashlight and the shotgun and stepped outside into the dawn haze. There she was. Bent over, cutting the padlock on my feed storage unit. She didn't even flinch when the sensor light snapped on. "Back away from the building," I said. She turned slowly. Saw the gun. Smirked. "You wouldn't dare." I fired once. A warning shot. Into the air. She dropped her bag and ran. I didn't chase her. I figured that was the end. I was wrong. Because 3 weeks later, after the town meeting, after I filed a formal complaint, after she sent me a cease and desist letter for harassment, she came back. Same time. Same place. Only this time, I wasn't on the porch. I was right there, behind the barn, watching as she cut through the same lock again. She never even saw me step out of the shadows. And then, bang! The shot echoed across the property. She screamed. Dropped to the ground. And that's when I saw what she was holding. It wasn't just bolt cutters this time. She had something else in her bag. And when I opened it later, what I found made my blood run cold. The ambulance took 17 minutes to arrive. I counted every one of them in silence, pacing back and forth in the dust while Cheryl lay there groaning with her hands clenched tight over her thigh. blood soaked through her linen pants, a slow, dark stain crawling across the fabric. She didn't speak at first. She just whimpered, teeth gritted, eyes wide as she stared up at me like I was the criminal. I wasn't. I'd called 911 the second the shot went off. I told them it was an accident, that someone had broken onto my land, and I feared for my safety. I used the words the sheriff had told me months ago, I am defending private property. I said them again and again like a shield. When the deputies showed up, they didn't cuff me. They didn't even touch their holsters. One of them was the same guy who'd been here when I filed the first report. He looked at Cheryl, looked at the bag beside her, and then met my eyes with something that wasn't quite pity. "You sure you didn't hit her on purpose?" he asked. "No," I said quietly. "I aimed for her shoulder. Hit her leg." He gave a slow nod. "Well, you're lucky. If she dies, it's a different conversation." She didn't die. That alone felt like both a miracle and a problem. While the EMTs worked on her, one deputy opened her bag. What he found wasn't just bolt cutters this time. There were 6 labeled toolkits, mine, all of them. A bundle of barbed wire wrapped in cloth. And underneath it all, a worn spiral notebook with sketches and measurements of my barn layout, entry points, and motion sensor locations. She'd been planning this for weeks. Maybe months. She knew where the cameras were. Where the locks were. Even when I fed the animals. And yet, they didn't arrest her. They said they'd take everything into evidence. That they'd investigate. But no handcuffs. No ride in the back of the squad car. Just a stretcher and a few awkward glances. I stood there watching the ambulance disappear down the gravel road, my hands still trembling on the shotgun, not from the weight, but from the feeling that something had just snapped loose inside me. This wasn't over. The next week was quiet, but not peaceful. I barely slept. Every time the wind rattled the tin roof, I flinched. Every time I heard a car slow roll down the road, I peeked out the blinds. The sheriff called once to say they were reviewing the case, but nothing beyond that. No follow-up. No confirmation that charges were coming. Meanwhile, whispers spread. At the feed store, people stared. Some with sympathy, others with that smug HOA smugness, like I'd brought this on myself. "She's just a concerned citizen," one woman muttered as I walked past. "She was stealing," I shot back without turning. They didn't care. All they saw was that I'd pulled a trigger. That I'd fired on a woman. That I was the man from Phoenix who brought guns and chaos to a quiet place. My neighbor, a retired Army vet named Dean, stopped by 2 days later with a 6-pack and an offer to help reinforce the fencing. "Don't let this mess twist you up," he said, hammering a new latch into place. "People like her? They prey on soft-spoken folks. You held your ground." "I didn't want this," I told him. He shrugged. "No one ever does. But that doesn't mean you let it go." We reinforced everything. The barn. The shed. Even the coop. I installed an extra sensor on the back door and set up 2 more cameras. It felt like I was fortifying for war, and in a way, I was. Not with bullets, but with boundaries. I needed her to see that I wouldn't break. But Cheryl didn't just vanish. One afternoon, about 10 days after the shooting, I came home from town to find something stuck in the gate. A letter. Typed. No envelope. "This is not the end. You have violated my rights. I will be pursuing legal action. This property should never have been sold to someone like you. This is not a place for loners. We are a community. And you are not part of it." My hands crumpled the paper before I finished reading. I looked up at the road. No cars. No tracks. Just that eerie stillness that Cold Creek Ridge wore too often. That night, I sat on the porch with Jack curled at my feet, watching the moon climb behind the trees. For a brief moment, the air was cool and silent, and I almost felt peace again. Until I heard a sound. A clink. Soft. Metallic. It came from behind the barn. Jack's ears perked. I stood up slowly, shotgun resting across my arms, and stepped off the porch. 1 foot. Then the other. Silent. The lights hadn't gone off. No alarm. But the motion sensor was blinking red. Someone had triggered it. I crept around the barn, boots light on the dry grass. My breath is shallow. My heart is slamming in my chest. And that's when I saw it. A figure. Ducking near the far side of the coop. Thin. Lean. Wearing a hoodie this time instead of the sun hat. But I knew that posture. That frame. It was Cheryl. Back again. Limping. She turned just enough for the porch light to catch her face, and that same wild, glassy look was in her eyes. She was holding something. Not a bag this time. Canister. And in her other hand, a lighter. I froze. And then she struck it. Flames sparked in the dark. And I screamed. Drop it now. But her eyes burned back at me with something I'd never seen before. Something unhinged. And then she made a move, toward the shed. That's when everything exploded into motion. I didn't think, I just acted. The shot rang out before my brain even caught up with what was happening. My finger squeezed the trigger from instinct, not intention. The sound was deafening in the stillness, echoing off the barn walls and ricocheting through the trees like thunder. Cheryl dropped to the ground hard, the lighter flying from her hand, the canister rolling into the dirt. Flames never caught, thank God, but the threat had been real. Too real. My breath caught in my throat as I stepped forward, gun still raised, heart hammering like it was trying to break through my ribs. She was lying on her side, curled up, her hoodie darkened at the shoulder where the shot grazed her. Blood pooled fast beneath her. She was groaning again. Same as last time. Only this time, it wasn't shock in her eyes, it was rage. Pure, bitter rage. You think you've won? She hissed through clenched teeth. I didn't answer. I couldn't. My mouth felt like sand. I called 911 again. Told them someone was shot again. Gave the same address. The same tone. The same guilt hums under my voice. When the sheriff's deputy arrived, his face went blank. Like he wasn't even surprised anymore. "Third time she's been out here?" he asked while the EMTs loaded her into the ambulance. "Fourth," I muttered. But only the second time she got hit. He shook his head. "This woman doesn't quit." I nodded slowly. I don't think she's ever been told no in her life. That time, they took her away for more than stitches. That time, they actually arrested her. Not right away, but the hospital called the sheriff when they found burn marks on her hands and traces of gasoline on her jacket. The deputy said it was enough to start building a case. Arson intent. Trespassing. Burglary. Maybe more. Still, I didn't feel better. The following days were the quietest since I moved in. But they didn't bring relief, only a strange, haunted calm. The kind that comes after a storm, when the air still buzzes with tension and you don't know if it's really over. Everywhere I went in town, people looked at me differently now. Some with sympathy. Others with suspicion. At the hardware store, a guy near the cash register leaned over and said, "Heard you shot a woman on your porch." "Not quite," I said. "Well, either way. You sure pissed off the wrong neighborhood." He wasn't wrong. My mailbox was smashed 3 days later. Then someone dumped a bag of garbage over my fence. I had no proof it was related to Cheryl, but I knew in my gut it was. Some of her friends from the HOA had clearly decided to carry the torch while she was out of commission. They weren't done punishing me for not playing along with their picture-perfect community ideals. Dean stopped by again. Dropped off some spare lumber and just stood on the porch with me for a while without saying much. "Are you holding up?" he finally asked. I shrugged. I'm tired. He nodded slowly. This place will break you if you let it. But it can also build you into someone stronger. I didn't come here to fight anyone. No one does. But some people don't like when others live free. His words hung in the air. That evening, I took Jack for a walk along the fence line. The sun was setting behind the hills, casting gold over the weeds and the old windmill. I let the dog sniff and wander while I checked the gate locks, the new security lights, and the fresh camera batteries. I'd started sleeping with the shotgun by the bed now. Not because I was scared, at least, that's what I told myself, but because I refused to be caught off guard again. I was halfway back to the house when Jack stopped cold. His ears perked. He growled. Low and mean. I followed his gaze and saw something hanging from the tree near the coop. A doll. Homemade. Straw hair. Button eyes. Dressed in flannel. Its chest was painted red. At its feet was a note, nailed into the bark. You're next. I didn't touch it. I just stared. Because that doll? It looked exactly like me. Flannel shirt. Tan work pants. Even the boots were painted black and brown to match the ones I wore. Someone had made that. Someone had been close enough to study me. Close enough to know what I wore. What I looked like from a distance. I brought Jack inside, locked every door, and sat in the living room with all the lights off, heart thudding in my ears. Whoever hung that doll wasn't just trying to scare me. They wanted me to know this wasn't over. The next morning, I called the sheriff again. He came out, took pictures, and wrote notes, but his tone was tired. He said they'd look into it. Same as before. Anyway, Cheryl's behind this? I asked. She's in custody, he said. But that doesn't mean she's the only one who doesn't like you. He paused. You've made some waves. I didn't know what that meant exactly, but I could guess. The HOA was a tight-knit group. Cheryl wasn't just a crazy neighbor, she was a symbol to them. A leader. Someone who protected the neighborhood from outsiders, even if it meant crossing lines. Now that I'd stood my ground, they weren't just mad, they felt challenged. And the worst part? I still didn't know how far they were willing to go. The doll was creepy. The threats were chilling. But it was what happened next that really shook me. 2 days later, I got a letter. Certified mail. No return address. Inside, a single sheet of paper. Typed. You've been warned. You have until Friday to leave. After that, we won't hold back. No signature. Just those words. I folded the paper slowly, hands steady even though my gut twisted with dread. That night, I stayed up late, staring out the window, waiting for a sound that never came. Until it did. At exactly 2:47 a.m., my alarm blared. Eastfield sensor. I grabbed the gun. Rushed outside in my boots and boxers, Jack at my side. But when I got to the barn, there was nothing. No lights tripped. No figure. Just the heavy silence of night. I walked the perimeter, flashlight in one hand, gun in the other. Still nothing. Then I found it. On the ground, by the edge of the tall grass. Another doll. This one burned. Its head half melted. Charred black where the face had been. And stuck in its chest, my spare barn key. Taken from inside the shed. Someone had been inside. I didn't sleep at all after that. There's something that happens to your mind when you know, without a doubt, that someone was standing in your space while you were unaware. That someone had time to look around. To choose what to take. To leave something behind. It shifts something deep in your bones. Suddenly, your home stops feeling like yours. It starts feeling like a target. I sat in the kitchen with the burned doll on the table in front of me, the scorched plastic head twisted sideways like it was watching me. The barn key stuck through its chest was rusted, but I recognized it. I kept it in a drawer behind the feed barrels. Whoever left this knew my layout well. Too well. I changed the locks that morning. Every one. Barn, shed, feed house, even the front and back doors. I replaced every key. Then I went into town and bought 4 more trail cameras, military grade. Night vision. Heat sensing. The guy at the shop raised an eyebrow. Coyotes getting real smart these days? Something like that, I muttered. But I wasn't laughing. Not even close. The only person I could talk to about any of it was Dean. He showed up again the next afternoon, this time in his old pickup with a toolbox and 2 folding chairs. "You keep collecting fans," he said dryly, looking at the burned doll I'd left sitting on the fence post. "Don't joke," I said. "I think this is getting worse." "I don't think." "I know." We sat in silence for a long while. The sun dipped low behind the windmill, and the chickens clucked somewhere behind the coop. Dean cracked open a soda and leaned back. "You ever think about leaving?" he asked eventually. I didn't answer at first. Then I shook my head. This land is the only thing that's felt like mine in years. I'm not giving it up because some HOA cult thinks they run the world. He smiled at that. "Then you better be ready. Folks like Cheryl, they don't fight fair." That night, I set all the new cameras. I double-checked the motion lights. I fed Jack early and kept him inside. And around midnight, it happened again. Not a full break-in. Just a test. I heard gravel shift outside the shed. Just one footstep, but it was enough. When I opened the back door, I saw the beam of a flashlight cut across the yard, then vanish. Someone was scouting. But this time, I was ready. I watched the footage the next morning, flipping through the night vision stills one by one. There, at the edge of the screen, was a shape. Tall. Hooded. The same figure I'd seen the night Cheryl tried to light the shed. Only this one didn't limp. It wasn't her. Someone else had taken up her game. And they were getting braver. I called the sheriff again. Same routine. Another deputy. Another sigh. "You're not crazy," he said. "We've had a couple of complaints from other folks near the ridge. Little things. Property lines. Noise. But nothing like this." "Someone's watching my house," I said. "They left threats. Burned dolls. They stole my key." "I'll write it up," he said, "but unless we catch them in the act." "I did catch them," I snapped. "They're on camera." He looked at the screen. Squinted. "Could be anyone." That was the last time I called them. If they weren't going to help, I'd handle it my way. I went back into town the next day. Found a security company run by a former Marine. Showed him the footage. Told him everything. He didn't flinch. "Night patrol. 1 week," he said. "We'll watch. If something moves, we'll catch it." So I hired him. Paid more than I could afford. But I slept for the first time in weeks knowing someone was out there. 3 days passed. Nothing. 4th night, movement. The guard called me at 3:12 a.m. "Got a live one. Near your east barn. You want me to call it in?" I said yes. 20 minutes later, the sheriff's car pulled up. They found the figure crouched near my fuel tanks with a crowbar. Not Cheryl. A man. Late 30s. HOA member. Lived 2 streets over in Cold Creek Ridge. His name was Jason. Apparently, he was one of Cheryl's neighborhood watch friends. He'd helped her file reports about my land. He was also the one who mailed the certified threats. When they arrested him, he screamed something about protecting the community and taking the land back. They hauled him away. And for a moment, I thought, maybe this is it. Maybe it's over. But then came the twist I never saw coming. The next morning, a woman showed up at my gate. Tall, tanned, wide-brimmed sun hat. I didn't recognize her at first. Not until she took off the hat. Cheryl. Out on bail. Face pale. Arm in a sling. And in her good hand, an envelope. "I'm suing you," she said calmly. "For what?" I asked. "For attempted murder, defamation, and emotional damage." She smiled. And then added, "And I want your land." That's when I realized. She hadn't come alone. There was a car waiting at the edge of the road. And someone was filming. I didn't say a word. Not to Cheryl. Not to the person filming. I just stared at her as the sun blazed behind her like some twisted spotlight. Her arm was still bandaged, but her eyes had that same fire I saw the night she tried to set my shed on fire. Like getting caught, getting shot, getting arrested, none of it mattered. She was still coming. "You don't stand a chance," I said, low. She tilted her head and smirked. "We'll see." She handed me the envelope like it was an invitation to a tea party. Then she turned, walked back to the SUV, and got in. The camera panned across my land one more time before the car pulled off. I stood there for a long time. Jack was at my feet, growling softly. Inside the envelope was a thick stack of documents. Real ones. Legal papers. She had filed a civil lawsuit, claims of harassment, emotional trauma, property damage, and unlawful discharge of a firearm. All of it twisted, exaggerated, full of lies. But what got me most wasn't the lawsuit. It was the handwritten note at the bottom. "This isn't about you. It's about principle. You don't belong here. We're going to bury you." That night, I sat on the porch until dawn. I didn't move. Didn't eat. Didn't blink. Because now, it wasn't just her. She had supporters. People willing to sneak onto my land. To threaten me. To record me. To burn dolls and write notes and twist the law into a weapon. And somewhere inside me, a part that had been holding on to patience, to forgiveness, finally let go. I wasn't leaving. I wasn't running. If she wanted war, then she'd get it. But not the way she expected. I went back into town the next morning. Not to complain. Not to file another report. To meet with a lawyer. Her name was Carla Riggins. Sharp. No nonsense. She'd handled property disputes and harassment suits for over 20 years. She didn't flinch when I laid it all out. She leaned back in her chair, arms folded, and said, "You've got a hell of a case. Can we beat her?" "Oh, we're not just going to beat her," she said. "We're going to make her wish she'd never heard your name." I didn't smile. But something loosened in my chest. For the first time in months, I felt a flicker of control. Carla filed a counterclaim the same day. Criminal trespassing. Arson intent. Damages. She sent out formal requests for the camera footage, police statements, and witness names. The sheriff's office, pressured now from both sides, finally agreed to release the full incident reports. Dean agreed to testify. So did the guard from the security company. Even the teenage boy who lived on the edge of the neighborhood, the one who had seen Cheryl sneaking into my barn months ago, was willing to talk. Piece by piece, the puzzle was building. But Cheryl didn't slow down. She escalated. First, it was flyers. Stapled to trees near my land, scattered at the feed store, even mailed anonymously to nearby homes. Ugly stuff. Grainy black and white pictures of my house with phrases like "danger to the community" and "mentally unstable man with guns." Somehow, she got a still from the night I fired the warning shot, probably pulled from the HOA's security cams, and printed it with a caption, "He's armed. Beware." It was working. People crossed the street when they saw me in town. A cashier at the market handed me change with her eyes on the floor. Even folks I barely knew whispered when I passed. But not all of them. One woman, Rebecca, who owned the flower shop, slipped me a note when I came in for soil. "Don't let them scare you. Cheryl tried to shut down my cousin's daycare for noise pollution. She's a tyrant. Keep fighting." I held on to that note, because it reminded me that not everyone in this town had gone blind. The hearing was set for 3 weeks out. I spent every day preparing, digging up receipts, organizing video files, listing every date, every incident, every moment Cheryl crossed the line. Carla worked like a machine. She even pulled tax maps proving my land sat fully outside HOA jurisdiction. But just when I thought we had the upper hand, Cheryl struck again. 2 days before the hearing, I came home from town to find smoke rising from my back pasture. Not fire. Smoke. Thick and oily. I sprinted out with Jack right behind me. Near the tree line, I saw it, a metal drum. Blackened. Still smoldering. Inside were scraps of burned cloth, melted plastic, and something else. Paper. I dug through the ash with a stick, pulling out pieces of scorched documents. My documents. Receipts. Blueprints. Photos. They'd been taken from my shed. Someone had broken in again. Not just to mess with me. To sabotage the case. I ran back to the house. The lock on the shed had been pried loose. The drawers were ransacked. Files missing. Some of the originals. The backups were digital, but it was still a hit. I called Carla and told her everything. Her voice was sharp. "We'll file a motion immediately. This is evidence tampering. Maybe even witness intimidation." But her tone said it all. This wasn't just some property dispute anymore. This was a full-blown battle. And Cheryl wasn't fighting alone. She had someone helping her. Someone who knew where to find what mattered most. That night, I reinforced everything again. Every camera. Every lock. But something in the air felt different. Still. Heavy. Wrong. At exactly 1:17 a.m., the dog started barking. Not Jack. Not just him. All the neighborhood dogs. Howling. I threw on my boots and grabbed the gun. Checked the monitors. Every camera, offline. Every single one. I ran outside, flashlight bouncing. And then I saw it. A fresh cut in the wire fence. Right near the coop. And in the distance. A figure. Standing at the edge of the woods. Not Cheryl. Someone taller. Wearing a black hoodie and gloves. I raised the gun. "Show me your hands." The figure didn't move. Didn't run. Just stared. And then, slowly, raised something into the air. Not a weapon. A phone. And from the phone's speaker came Cheryl's voice. Laughing. "You still think this is about property?" Then the figure ran. Fast. Too fast. And I was left there, standing in the moonlight, holding a gun, with every camera dead and a sick feeling growing in my gut. This was no longer just personal. This was coordinated. And they were getting ready for something big. The morning of the court hearing, I woke up to a brick through my front window. It was wrapped in newspaper and duct tape, a single word scrawled across the side in red permanent marker. Leave. The sheriff came. Took photos. Logged the evidence. Promised, again, that an investigation was ongoing. But it was all protocol at this point. Empty routine. No arrests. No action. Just clipboard empathy and a nod on the way out. I swept up the glass myself. Jack stood near the door, tail low, eyes on the road like he was waiting for the next one. I put on my best jeans, a clean flannel, and headed into town for the hearing, my stomach twisting the whole drive. The courthouse in Cold Creek Ridge wasn't big. Just 3 floors, a few stuffy rooms with buzzing ceiling fans and dusty blinds. But that day, it felt like a coliseum. Like I'd been thrown into a ring, and the crowd was waiting to see who'd bleed first. Cheryl arrived late, of course. Wearing white. Sling off. Hair straightened. A faint limp that vanished the moment she walked past the judge. She had 2 lawyers. I had Carla. But Carla was worth 10 of them. She stood up with her folders and her facts and her fire and made the case with the precision of a surgeon. We had video. Audio. Witnesses. A full printed log of incidents, property maps, and even a statement from the hardware store clerk who saw Cheryl buying the same bolt cutters left near my shed. Then Cheryl's team stood. And what they delivered was theater. They painted her as a concerned citizen, traumatized by unprovoked violence from a reclusive and unstable man who had made neighbors feel unsafe. They claimed I had set traps. That I had lured her. That I'd created an environment of fear. And the worst part? Some people in that courtroom believed it. I saw them. HOA board members. Residents. A woman I'd once helped lift feed bags into her truck. They avoided my eyes. When Cheryl took the stand, she wept. Tears, trembling hands, the whole show. I only ever wanted to protect our community, she said. I never meant for any of this to happen. And when the judge asked about the notebook, the tools, and the trespassing, she looked him in the eye and said, I was investigating code violations. He threatened me. That was when Carla stood again. This isn't about code, she said. It's about control. It's about a group of people who decided that this man didn't belong and made it their mission to terrorize him until he left. My client didn't start a war. He survived one. The room fell silent. The judge recessed for 30 minutes. I waited in the hall, staring at the beige carpet, trying not to picture myself back on that porch, finger on the trigger, Cheryl's scream ringing through the barnyard. But peace wasn't coming. Not yet. Because just as we were called back in, a deputy ran through the courthouse doors. Whispered something into the judge's ear. His expression changed. Stern. Alarmed. He turned to us and said, Court is adjourned until further notice. There's been an incident. People murmured. Phones buzzed. I followed the crowd out to the steps. And that's when I saw it. Smoke. Rising in the distance. From the ridge. From my land. I didn't wait. I jumped into my truck and drove faster than I ever had in my life. The smoke turned to fire by the time I hit the dirt road. Black clouds churning above the barn, flames licking the sky like angry fingers. I slammed the brakes, jumped out, and ran toward the pasture with a wet shirt over my face. Dean was already there, garden hose in hand, trying to douse the dry brush. I saw them, he yelled over the roar. 2 of them. Hoodies. Ran out the back. I didn't need names. I already knew. I dropped to my knees, throwing dirt and water onto the chicken coop wall as the fire spread. Jack barked like mad near the porch, the heat driving him back. By the time the fire crew arrived, half the pasture was gone. The coop, charred. The east barn wall, blackened. But we saved the house. Barely. They called it suspicious activity. Said it looked coordinated. But no one was caught. The cameras were dead again. Wires cut. Same as last time. And Cheryl? Gone. Disappeared after the courthouse. Her phone, off. Her car, missing. The judge postponed the hearing indefinitely, citing safety concerns. The sheriff finally admitted what everyone else knew. This isn't about property lines anymore. I rebuilt what I could. Dean helped. So did a few neighbors who'd finally woken up to the madness. Even Rebecca from the flower shop brought over sandwiches one day and stayed to paint new boards for the chicken coop. And then, 2 weeks later, it happened. A package arrived. No label. No return address. Just a plain brown box. Inside, a single, burned doll. And a note. You survived. But we're still here. Watching. I stood there holding it in the doorway, wind blowing through the screen, the smell of smoke still faint in the dirt. And I smiled. Because I'd already won. Not in court. Not with cops. Not with cameras or lawyers. But with something they didn't understand. I was still standing. On my land. With my dog. My tools. My scars. And they could try again. They could threaten. Burn. Scheme. Whisper. But they'd already lost the one thing they needed most to win. My fear. And from that moment on, I decided. Let them come. I'm not moving. I'm not hiding. I'm not leaving. Because I may be a simple man. But this is my farm. And no one, not Cheryl, not the HOA, not 100 burned dolls, will ever take that from me again. You have just heard the story of a woman who got shot not once, but twice, because she couldn't leave someone else's land alone. But the question still remains, what would you have done in his boots? Let us know in the comments. If this story left you speechless, hit subscribe, because the next HOA tale might just be even darker. Turn on notifications, and we'll see you in the next story where justice isn't always handed out by law, it's forged in the fire of survival.